Hey everybody, welcome back to Sons of a Pitch Soccer Podcast. We are here today, myself and Nick. Nick is making his first appearance on a picks and predictions video or a preview video for MLS Cup Final 2019, Seattle Sounders hosting Toronto FC.
That's right. I've been giving Mike just so much crap about his predictions and picks, and as it turns out in our bracket challenge, he finished a number of spots higher than me in our bracket challenge picks. So I am here to first of all just acknowledge that fact, and secondly join in on the picks and predictions, because there's only one prediction we have to make tonight, and that is the MLS Cup Final.
You got it. So thanks for joining us here on YouTube. Check out the podcast, sonsofapitchsoccer.com, at SOP Soccer. Find us on iTunes, Android, Stitcher, however you get your podcasts. Sons of a Pitch, an American soccer podcast. We just finished up recording tonight, just a few minutes ago, and now we're doing this YouTube video to talk about the picks and predictions and preview for MLS Cup 2019. Seattle Sounders hosting Toronto FC. Thanks for joining us. First thing I want to talk about, Nick, dude, Seattle's opening up the entire stadium for this game. 69,000 plus. It is a sellout. Ticket prices are outrageous on StubHub, SeatGeek, all your third-party selling apps. Tickets are big. This is a big matchup here. Seattle has not opened up the entire stadium much at all, except for maybe a Portland game like 5 years ago. This one's going to be fun to watch. Great atmosphere in Seattle. One of the best atmospheres in MLS. Coming from a TFC fan, yes, I will admit it, Seattle is one of the best. What are your thoughts about that, Nick?
Well, absolutely agree with you. One of the best atmospheres in MLS and in North American soccer, probably. We talked about in the podcast a little bit that maybe this isn't the finals matchup that a lot of fans wanted. I know I really wanted to see different teams in the final matchup, and maybe it's not the final matchup that the league wanted as far as promoting their most popular players, promoting certain markets, things of that nature, gathering an international audience. But from a purely ticket sales perspective, I don't know how you could go wrong with 69,000 seats in Seattle. And tell you what, while you're talking about the next segment, I'm going to actually do a quick search here and see what goes on StubHub, if we can find some secondhand ticket prices and get them out for you.
Yeah, so I mean, you look back at 2018 with Atlanta United hosting Portland Timbers in the Benz in Atlanta. That game was, 72,000 or something, a huge record for the MLS Cup, for MLS Cup Finals. And now they're doing it again in Seattle with a big stadium, full stadium opened up. It's great to see for MLS from the standpoint of not only the neutrals as well as the diehard fans. But one thing I want to talk a little bit about is the early start time. This game is slated to start at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, which obviously we know they'll push back to about 3:25 to give you 25 minutes of promotions, commercials, and pregame show to get you interested. But this game, 3:25 Eastern start, then you kind of kick back to the Central Time where we are, 2:25. Then you kick back to the West Coast where this game actually is. We're talking a 12:25 start. That's midday. That's like a 1 o'clock kickoff NFL time. The Sounders in Seattle, their NFL team, the Seahawks, they don't play any 1 o'clock games unless they're on the East Coast. So the early start time definitely comes into play here. Definitely going to affect Toronto FC more coming from the East Coast. They're not used to that, having to, get up real early and have their breakfast and then go to the stadium for the match. They're used to the primetime games, maybe late afternoon Eastern Standard Time games, but this might play a factor in this game.
It very well could, and we got to take into account travel. We got to take into account training the week leading up to it. We got to take into account just the consistency that these teams put in week in and week out of how they train, how they prep, meal planning, rest schedules, recovery after training sessions, things of that nature. But again, we are at the highest level of soccer in the United States. We're with two teams who have experience in the playoffs, experience in cup finals. I think they're going to be ready for it, Mike. I don't believe that the schedule is going to be as influential as it might be for other teams or in other cases.
Yeah, and that's, look, it definitely favors the Seattle team at home. A little bit of home field advantage. This game is going to be on ABC, national television audience for the United States, on over-the-air TV. We're not talking about ESPN. We're not talking about FS1. We're talking about ABC. Everybody with an antenna can catch this game. Big deal for United States Soccer and for ABC to get this game on that, on national scale, therefore. So hopefully that'll turn out in the ratings for MLS, and maybe it'll be worth it. I really hope so, especially as a TFC fan, thinking that it's probably going to hurt my team a little bit having to play early.
Possibly. Well, Mike, I want to get back real quick. So those ticket prices, just quickly on StubHub, it's $200 for a single ticket in the upper bowl, as far back as you can get.
Way up in the corner.
$200.
Yep.
If you want to get, in the 100 level, then you're looking at around like $1,500.
Wow.
So that's what these tickets are going for on the resale market. We got a club level ticket here that's $1,400. A couple 200 level tickets, $1,400. But yeah, if you're looking at the kind of 50-yard line, center line, so to speak, you're definitely paying right around $1,500 after they get you with taxes and fees and all that sort of thing, plus parking, etc. So,
wow.
Yeah, MLS ticket prices going up as the game gets more and more popular.
They are.
Let's just hope they stay accessible to the regular fans.
Yeah,
as well.
we talked about it with LAFC and LA Galaxy in the second round of the playoffs there. It was the hottest ticket so far on the resale market.
Yep.
And this is going to eclipse that very easily. I know for myself, I went to MLS Cup 2016 in Toronto where Seattle won on penalties, the first matchup of Seattle versus TFC. And I paid $375 to get up in the upper deck, but just past the center line. So pretty much sideline seats on the upper deck, $375. You're not going to find that in Seattle. It's a better ticket market, so that's great for MLS.
Was it Canadian dollars? Or
No,
American
it was
dollars?
US dollars.
It was US
Yep.
dollars?
That
Okay,
was,
just checking on the exchange rate for that one.
Anyways,
What
let's
do you
talk
got
a little
next,
bit
Mike?
about the projected 11s. So you've got a couple teams who have had some great performances in the last couple of rounds. Toronto FC knocking off New York City on the road, then going down to Atlanta, knocking them off on the road, and Seattle winning at home against RSL, and then going on the road to take out the MLS Supporters Shield champions in LAFC, the best team possibly in MLS history until they lost that matchup. Can you really see any changes from this projected 11? I can't. My projected 11 in this for Seattle is obviously Stephen Fry in goal. No question about that. You've got Brad Smith, Arriaga, Kim Ki-hee, and Kelvin Leerdam at the back for Seattle. In the midfield, they're going to have five. I think they'll have five in the midfield. Christian Roldan, Svensson, Jordan Morris, Nicholas Ladero, and Jovan Jones in the midfield with that lone striker, Raul Rio Diaz, the absolute killer and 100% clinical finisher in Raul Rui Diaz. What are your thoughts? Do you think they make any changes from LAFC that game?
I don't believe they do. I don't know who else they would bring off the bench that they'd want to start in these cases.
You got Nuhu
well, I'm
off
saying
the
like
left,
who would you want to bring off the bench to start this game in the
Right.
MLS Cup? I think they're going to keep it the same lineup, go with consistency. Additionally, they had such a good game plan on how to deal with LAFC, how to neutralize Carlos Vela, how to really kind of neutralize the strong attacking presence that LAFC brings. Why would you want to mix that up? Why would you want to change that? Unless they're kind of playing that chess match, Schmetzer and Vanny, and seeing who's going to one-up each other and who's going to get that front leg. I really don't see any changes between the two. I do want to point out, though, that Seattle is going to have to play a much neater game in the back. They were really fortunate that the officials didn't call any of those wacky handballs against some of their defenders,
Yeah.
and they were really fortunate that they didn't call any penalties against Arriaga, who was just throwing his shoulder into
He's
Vela,
kind of a bulldozer
who was
back
just
there, man.
knocking Vela around, trying to get him off the ball. There were at least 2 instances of Arriaga committing fouls against Vela that could have been penalties, and 2 instances of handballs that could have been penalties that weren't called. So Seattle is going to have to tighten that up in this MLS Cup Final.
Absolutely. Now looking at TFC, they go in with Westberg in goal. There's no question there. Justin Morrow, Chris Mavinga, Laurent Simon, and Auro in the back. This is probably one of the closest to, of course, we have Josie Altidore. Will he play? Will he not play? But in the back, you've got an Omar Gonzalez who is fully fit. He's been on the bench for the last 2 matchups. Do you mess up that back line? Do you take out Simon, who has played with Mavinga extremely well against DC, against New York City, against Atlanta, and put in the better player in Omar Gonzalez? I don't know. I don't think they do, personally. I think you stick with what got you here. And then in the midfield, I think we got Osorio, Bradley, and Marky Delgado. And then up front, kind of in that three forward, false nine with Pozuelo in the middle. You got Benazet and Endo on the right and left wing. Look, I think the main question for TFC's projected 11 is, will Josie be back? You've got a couple different standpoints here. You got Greg Vanny saying, oh yeah, he'll be back. I really feel confident he'll be back. And then you got Josie Altidore the same day at the same training session coming out and saying, well, it's going to take a miracle for me to play in Seattle.
Hey, well, maybe Greg Vanny has an in with the big man upstairs. Maybe he's got a few extra prayers going on, and he knows the miracle is going to be granted. Maybe it's just all a very calculated move by TFC and Vanny and Altidore to kind of throw Seattle off, to kind of play those kind of, press conference head games. That way Schmetzer can't really prepare his Seattle team as he did against LAFC. The other kind of approach that Seattle might want to take here, and we heard it on Extra Time, who Bobby Warshaw really put forth his theory, is that Seattle knew they were an inferior team against the LAFC, so they had to prep like they were an inferior team. I don't know if they're going to take that same approach against TFC. Maybe they prep for Josie, knowing that if you prep for Josie and he doesn't play, well, there's a lesser caliber player that's out there anyway, and you're still going to be set. I think maybe that's the mindset that Seattle has to do. Will Josie play? Won't Josie play? As far as Gonzalez and Simon, look, if Simon plays his best game, yeah, absolutely keep him in there. If he plays his worst game, he's going to concede 3 goals and probably get called for at least 1 yellow card, if not a red. So that's kind of the floor and ceiling you have with Simon. Gonzalez, he has a much higher floor, but a much lower ceiling. So I think you just go with consistency, and if you get that early goal, then you bring Gonzalez in the second half for some fresh legs.
Okay, sounds good. So let's talk a little bit of who has the edge in each position. So as far as the goalkeepers go, Stefan Fry and Quentin Westberg, who do you have with the edge there?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty easy call that Stefan Fry is your better goalkeeper, just based on his history, based on his experience. Westberg, how many games has he started for TFC?
Yeah, about 20.
That's it. This is his first season as a full-time starter.
Right.
Yes, he's been playing well throughout the playoffs. Yes, he has played in other non-MLS regular season competitions for TFC. He's got to learn behind Alex Bono, but this is the MLS Cup Final. It's his first one. And I'm going to have to give the edge to Stefan Fry.
Absolutely. Stefan Fry gets the edge in that one. As far as defense goes, with Brad Smith, Arriaga, Kim Keehee, and Leerdam for Seattle, with a back line of Justin Morrow, Chris Mavinga, Laurent Simon, and Aro for TFC. Who do you give the edge there?
To me, it's kind of a toss-up, but if each side plays to their best ability, I kind of give a slight edge to TFC, because I think Aro can be the difference maker both defensively and then turn that into a counterattack and push forward, where I really don't see any of Seattle's defenders pushing into the attack as much as Aro might.
Right, because it depends on the formations, right? So if they do go with the 4-5-1, you're not going to see those wingers come up as much as you would in a 4-3-3 for TFC. So I think from an attacking standpoint, I think TFC has the edge. From a defensive standpoint, I think you got to go with Seattle. So my pick in this is that Seattle would have the edge.
All right, Mike, moving on to the midfield of these lineups. Again, Seattle, Roldan, Svensson, Morris, Ladero, Jones. On the other side of the ball, TFC has Osorio, Bradley, Delgado. And, you know what, we'll throw Pozuelo in there depending on where he plays at any given possession. Where do you think the midfield is going to be?
So for the midfield, I think that TFC actually has the edge in this, and I think it's a very an odd take for most people. They would probably say, just based on those 5 names from Seattle, that they would have the edge in this game. But I think that TFC will have the edge in the midfield. You're going to have Osorio, who's going to be pushing forward. And then you're going to have Bradley, who's going to kind of play that sweeper position, which is some of his best. He kind of plays that cam. He kind of plays the CDM. And then you got Marky Delgado, who has played extremely well in these playoffs, kind of pushing more towards the defensive side of things. And I got to give the edge just because Bradley, too, this is a $6.5 million game for him. So I think he's going to be playing an unbelievable match. And when you've got one of the best players in USMNT history, previous to November of 2016 or 2015.
Yeah, we can have that discussion at another time
another
about
time.
what Bradley's legacy is.
So I got to give the edge in the midfield to TFC.
See, I'm going to go the other way. I think it's Seattle. Bradley, I think, is going to be more of a stopper. Not positionally a stopper, but a stopper in the sense that he's going to have to stop the counterattack. He's going to have to stop the build-up. He's going to have to stop Seattle from swinging the ball offensively across the field laterally and trying to set up some mismatches and things of that nature. So I think he's going to be more hanging back on the defensive side of things. If Seattle pulls Bradley out of position, that's going to open up a lot of space for them. So wouldn't surprise me if their ball movement focuses on trying to pull Bradley out of possession. Additionally, you got Jordan Morris, who, as I mentioned in the podcast episode, might be the best American player in the MLS as of right now because of his hat trick in the playoff game, because of his scoring ability, because of how he can beat defenders one-on-one in the MLS, and how he can drag defenses around. They've got to account for him. He makes runs to the corners. He makes runs into the box. He's dangerous on set pieces. He's dangerous off the dribble, off the pass. Like, I think Jordan Morris, the way he's been playing right now, is better. Is going to elevate Seattle's midfield over TFC's midfield in this game. And then, of course, obviously, you've got Ladero and Roldan, who just kind of have been running rampant. They've got the freedom to do whatever they want, whereas TFC's got to play in that system. And I think I'll give the edge to Seattle on the midfield.
Okay, makes sense. As far as forwards go, you got TFC with Benazet, Pozuelo, and Endo. You kind of push Pozuelo into the midfield. And then Rui Diaz for Seattle. My choice in this game is obviously Rui Diaz. He's been clinical throughout the playoffs. If you kind of shift Morris into that spot and Ladero kind of pushing up a little bit as well, I think Seattle has the edge there.
Yeah, for me, looking strictly at attacking players, maybe it wasn't as lopsided as looking at the midfield because I kept Morris in the midfield. But yeah, he's definitely an attacking player for him. Rui Diaz, the most clinical finisher, but if you're going to have Osorio and Delgado and Benazet and Pozuelo and Endo and the miracle Josie Altidore coming on at some point, maybe he gets 20 minutes at the end of the game. If Josie gets on the field, I'm going to give the edge to TFC.
Okay. All right, so coaches, you got Schmetzer against Vanny.
Woo.
This is a tough one. For me, you've got two tacticians. They're not big names. They're not, huge. If you're thinking coaches and you're talking about the Jose Mourinhos and the Frank de Boers and these big name guys, neither one of them are that. They're just straight up tacticians, assistant coaches, players. This game to me is a complete draw on the coaching standpoint. I don't know. One of them is going to outcoach the other in this game. It will happen. But I can't pick one before this game.
Yeah, I'm going to just give a slight edge to Schmetzer of Seattle just because of how he utilizes his players. He's not married to any one formation or to any one tactic. Not that Vanny is.
Trying to use 4 different formations against Atlanta in the last game.
In a single game.
In a single game, 4 different formations.
But he is still formation-based, whereas I think Schmetzer gives his players the freedom to manipulate themselves all over the field as they see fit. So I think I'll give him that edge because he's got such a trust in his players, and they have such a trust in him. He's never been on the hot seat, I don't think, in his time as a coach in Seattle, and he's been there. This is his 4th season, I want to say, whereas Vanny is always on the hot seat or always the greatest person in TFC history. And then, 2 weeks later after that, Vanny out. And then a couple weeks later, he turned it around. Look at how wonderful he is. So I think that's why I'll give Seattle the coaching edge, but just slightly. Because you're right, Mike. Both these guys know how to get it done.
Absolutely. So I think it comes down to tactics. What are we going to see? Is this going to be an exciting game or a boring game? We had a boring game in 2016. Seattle sat back. TFC did a lot of attacking but couldn't finish. It went to penalty kicks. We talked about it in the podcast episode. Seattle, the first team ever to win a cup final without a single shot on goal. 2017, Vanny threw a curveball out there with the lineup before the game. TFC dominated, 1-2-0. Could have been more. What are we going to see? Is this going to be boring, or is this going to be a real exciting game?
So you got two teams who typically play more defensive, especially TFC not having Josie. But then again, not having Omar Gonzalez either. How much are you going to rely on Laurent Simon? Fortunately, he's gotten the job done in these playoffs. So you typically have TFC playing a little more defensive. You typically have Seattle playing a little more defensive, ready to counterattack. Usually you see the rock, paper, scissors of high press, bunker and counter, and possession. Well, both of these teams are more likely to bunker and counter. So I don't know how that's going to play out. I think Seattle approaches it as they did with LAFC, where they're going to, in certain instances, give up the possession as long as it's not towards one of TFC's better attacking players. Like, they're not going to cede possession to Pozuelo or Osorio, but they're going to be just fine if Delgado is dribbling all around the field in the middle third. If Michael Bradley wants to get 7-8 touches on the ball at a time, let Bradley get his touches. As long as Bradley's not hitting those long diagonal balls, as long as Bradley isn't playing balls over the top to an onrushing Osorio, Seattle's going to be just fine sitting back and absorbing pressure. But once they get the ball, they can do a number of different things. They can spring players loose in the channels. They can build up towards the center of the field with Rui Diaz and Morris. I think it's going to be a more exciting game.
Okay.
Especially in the second half. It's a cup final. If this is a draw or a one-goal game, these teams are going to go for it, and I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, and usually cup finals are a little bit more boring than they are exciting. That's been proven throughout time. But I think that I honestly think it's going to get blown up. I think both coaches are going to go in with kind of a game plan, and then 20 minutes in, it's going to be completely thrown out the window, and it's going to get crazy. So that's my say from that standpoint. Now it's prediction time. Let's talk about who we think is going to win this game. Nick, from my standpoint, I am a diehard TFC fan. I love TFC. I'm so excited for this game. I just can't see it happening. Josie Altidore, the question mark's there for him. I have said it before when they were playing DC United. I didn't think they were going to get through that game without Josie and Omar Gonzalez. When they were playing New York City, I didn't think they could get it done. Against Atlanta, I'm like, it's a good season. Either way, I don't see him getting it done. There's too many question marks for Josie Altidore. If Josie was guaranteed to be in this game, it might be a little bit different. I might have more faith in TFC. But I think it's going to be a very even game. Back and forth. But you got to go with the home team in this matchup. They're going to have 70,000 fans behind them. It's the game they've been waiting for. They've never hosted an MLS Cup Final with the Sounders in it. And so that is kind of the determining factor for me. Unfortunately, I do have to pick Seattle in this final to win the trilogy, win MLS Cup 2019. That's my thought. Nick, what do you think?
Well, I'm sure all the TFC fans are happy you're picking against TFC, knowing your track record of picks with them. But yeah, I'm also going to go with Seattle on this one. All things being equal, home field advantage would give Seattle a bit of an edge. But I really don't think it's as equal as it seems. I think Vanny's used up all the magic that he can. I think that TFC is just, this run has been stretched too long for them to not have Josie, to not have Gonzalez, to not have some of their other players. There's probably going to be a bit of a tail off. I think that both teams are going to come out conservative to start the game. I know I just said that it's going to be an exciting second half, but I think they're going to be conservative to start the game, and in a shorter competitive match, I'm going to give the edge to Seattle. Seattle's got playmakers. They've got experience. They've got the clinical finishing of Rui Diaz in the final third. I think it's a close game. I think it's 3-2 Seattle.
Okay. As far as a score line, I'm gonna go with 2-0 Seattle. That's my score line. I think it'll be 1-0 early. That'll kind of change the game plans up, and then TFC is going to get caught towards the end of the game pushing forward. So there you have it. Thank you for joining us for our MLS Cup preview and prediction. Make sure to check out Sons of a Pitch Soccer Podcast. We bring our podcast to you every single week. We are consistent. We will be bringing you content throughout the offseason. We appreciate you clicking this video and watching us discuss this wonderful game that's coming on Sunday. Thanks for watching. Find us on Twitter at SOP Soccer on Twitter. We'll talk to you guys soon. Enjoy MLS Cup.